Dom, you made the mad dash and you were fortunate enough to get an exemption. Can you talk us through that process?
Yeah, it was strange, really. It was kind of earlier last year, and I'd realised the borders were closed. And it's one of those conversations of kind of, we're just so used to them being open. We're so used to having that freedom. And for someone who travelled a lot in work and then to be restricted like that, but I was quite fortunate to go through the government process, filled in the necessary forms and got the permission to leave. The strange thing for me is that as a dual sort of passport holder, English heritage and Australian citizen, was actually leaving Australia was very difficult. Arriving in the UK was strangely simple. In fact, probably too simple. There was no quarantine at the time, no isolation, and not even any health checks. And so I walked, getting out of Australia was very difficult. Walking into the UK, swipe the passport, gates open, and there I was, which on reflection probably wasn't ideal. I think a few more tests and checks wouldn't have gone amiss.
And when you were over there, you had some devastating situations to deal with. Can you share your personal story for us, Dom?
Yeah, my older sister, who also happened to be my best friend, unfortunately a few years ago got diagnosed with terminal cancer. Again, as I mentioned before, I've been able to travel quite a lot as part of my role. I'm in a global role with Atlassian, so I get to visit Europe and Australia, the US, Asia Pac. And in the UK trips, I've got to visit my sister quite regularly. And sadly, her treatment sort of was coming to an end at the start of last year. And there was that devastating moment when I was sat here in Sydney thinking, maybe I can't go. But maybe I can't go back and see her. And I know for so many people that has been the case, and it's a horrible thought. I was fortunate. I was very much, and I do class myself as one of the fortunate ones, because I got to go and be with her back in the UK with her two younger boys, and the rest of my family. And you can't, I don't think you can put a dollar value or an explanation on the value of that time together to be with a loved one and to say goodbye.
Yeah, we're just seeing the photo there of you and your sister and your nephews as well. So, yeah, just devastating. But, we're going to talk about it shortly, about how you've overcome that and shared your sorrows with other people with your TED Talk. But before we have a look at the TED Talk, we'll switch hats and talk about your work at Atlassian, because you are a work futurist.
Yes.
What is a work futurist? It sounds fascinating.
JD, assuming it's just me and you chatting now, we can be deadly honest with each other. It is the best made-up job ever. It's a made-up job that kind of came true. We were experimenting. We always experiment at Atlassian. Our mission's all about unleashing the potential of teams. So we were kind of chatting about it one day, and we're like, well, we should understand the future of teams so that we can build today what our customers don't yet know they need. And so we invented this role. We did it as a 3-month experiment, and that was 4 years ago. So my job involves saying, what does the future of work look like in terms of education, technology, the workplace, different skills that people need? How do we think about teamwork? The fact that we always know that teamwork's more effective and helps teams be more productive, but let's be honest, it's really hard. When you work by yourself, it's quite easy. You've only got yourself to control, and then you work with others, certainly a diverse group. It is harder to work with different people. So how can we unleash that potential? How can we know more about it? Now, it had been a good role for a few years. When the pandemic hit, it kind of poured accelerant on everything, because every senior leader in Australia, in the US and the UK was on the phone saying, what is the future and how do I prepare for this? And what does it mean for things like remote work or distributed teams or diversity and inclusion? All these topics that we've kind of talked about a little bit but not quite delivered on suddenly elevated. And my favourite conversation that elevated was mental health. Right? How do we think about people as people rather than resources or assets? So it's a role that helps us not predict the future, but imagine what could it look like and how can we start to build a better future today?
How do you ideate in an innovative way? How do you even get into that behaviour that you're constantly thinking of the future? It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a mindset. So one is I'm very, very lucky to have a huge selection of people outside Atlassian that I get to hang out with. From the military, from elite sports teams in the US, UK and Australia, amazing thought leaders, companies that are at the leading edge of experimentation. And I get to hang out with neuroscientists, talk to me about how the brain works and a whole lot of random stuff. And then my job is to synthesize all that and bring it back into Atlassian. And part of the conversation there is, how can we evolve? How can we experiment? Which is something that we're trying to do every single day.
And you mentioned mental health, and through COVID, it's been a huge concern, arguably not getting the attention it needed. And you recently presented a TED Talk on 4 ways to live a happier and better life. Can you talk us through these points?
Yeah, there's a few things that came to mind. I mean, I've been in various conversations with people throughout the year around things like, the advantages of a diverse talent pool, the fact that we, saving commute time. There's so many positives that we were trying to talk about coming out of COVID, but I wanted us to confront the negatives as well. And I'd had a year that was two stories, right? I'd had a year that was very bad for me personally. I'd had my own health concerns. My sister, as I've mentioned, had passed away, but also good things had happened in 2020. And so I wanted to give that rounded story in my TED Talk this year. The four things that I talked about was around how you measure your own happiness. And it was around productivity and profit, understanding people, like your own mental and physical health, and how you impact society. It was about the planet, right? How we think about our sort of carbon footprint and purpose, right? And the idea was, I have a belief, and I don't know about you, Janie, I think a lot of people double down on productivity and profit all the time. And I think we do that at the detriment of maybe the other areas. And it's been fascinating for me after sharing this, the simple scoring of -1, 0 or 1, the number of people that have come back to me and gone, oh, my goal for 2021 was all about productivity, but I'm already scoring a 1. But on people, I'm a 0 or a -1. Like I'm not looking after my own mental health. I'm not looking after my own physical health. I'm not having the right impact on my family and society. So maybe that's the area I should invest in instead. And I think we've got this danger as a society that in the pursuit of wealth and capital growth, we've lost sight of why we're really here, right? We're here to make meaningful relationships. And I think it's one of the things that COVID's taught us. For me, personally, I've lived in the same apartment block for 3 years. I never knew my neighbours. But when COVID hit, I suddenly did. I didn't know the name of the people in the local coffee shop. But you go there a few times, and actually I've built more of a community in my local area off the back of COVID. Now, it shouldn't have taken COVID for me to do that. I'm, in theory, an adult. Like I sometimes act like a child, but in theory, I'm an adult. So how can we start to connect with the things that really make a difference? And how can we understand the legacy we want to leave behind? So the final element of the model there, the personal moral inventory, is around purpose. What is our purpose? How do we want to have an impact on the world around us? And what legacy do you want to leave behind when we finally go from here? And I think the more we can have those conversations around happiness, mental and physical health, and what it makes us individually, uniquely to be happy, I think we can all share that, and we can make a happier society, and we can build a better future. The future's not written. It's not waiting for us. We get to decide it every single day. So let's give it a red hot go.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I listened to your TED Talk, and you mentioned in 2 weeks in the lockdown, that's where you came up with all of this. And, you can sit there and mope, or you can actually, come up with this amazing plan that you've got. And you also mentioned some stuff about mental health when you're in lockdown as well, about being called from some certain people.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, the whole lockdown thing and the isolation, the quarantine, it's getting mixed press. Some say really good things, some really bad things. For me, it's one of those things, I knew I was going to have to do it. It was the price I knew I was going to have to pay for going to the UK. So I accepted it. It was far from an ideal time. I'd gone through my own cancer diagnosis and surgery. My sister had passed away, and then I'd returned alone to sit in this hotel room for 2 weeks. And in many ways it was bad, but in also many ways it gave me some time to think. The fascinating thing was every single morning we get a phone call on the hotel phone from the Red Cross. Like, hey, Dom, how are you? How are your feelings? How are your emotions? What are you up to? Just to chat. I think the lady that got me probably was unhappy that she got me, because at the end of 2 weeks I was burning her ear off with conversation. I'm like, oh, someone to chat to. Like, he was actually quite nice. But that balance is often not reported. The fact that there are people out there that even when you are in this necessary evil of quarantine, there are people out there to call you, and both the physical health was taken care of on a daily basis, but also the mental health. And so I think, despite the fact that the food was terrible and I was locked in a room for 2 weeks, it was a necessary evil. I'm glad I did it. It was the right thing to do. I luckily came out, with a negative track and trace, and was able to leave after those 14 days. But I think it's one of those things that if I compare us to other countries, I think it's a small price to pay to keep this terrible pandemic at bay.
Yeah, I agree. I love your positivity. So what next for Dom Price? You're going to do another TED Talk? What else are you going to do?
Well, the great challenge about TED Talks is you really only ever do one. Oh. And so it's weird. It's a very strange sensation. It's been a life goal of mine for a long time. And then it kind of comes along and you deliver it and you're like, oh, what does come next? And I think that's why the purpose element of the personal moral inventory became so important to me. I was like, what is my purpose? For me this year, as I mentioned in my TED Talk, I've got myself a wonderful girlfriend, right? We're going to invest in hanging out more. She's moving in. We're going to go on adventures, even though we can't leave the country. As soon as we can, we want to go back to the UK and visit family. I've still got work, which I'm extremely passionate about and I enjoy. But I think one of the things that the pandemic and illnesses and losing my sister taught me last year is balance. Like, balance things out and enjoy the moment. And so I'm investing to make sure every weekend or every week I do something different, something enjoyable, whether it be going for dinner with friends, reconnecting with someone. It kind of doesn't have to be a big deal. I'm not going to save the planet, right? I'm not a superhero. I don't have a cape, but I think I'm in control of my own destiny. So I'm going to have a lot of fun in 2021. And whatever talks you see me do by the end of the year, you'll see even more positivity and ideas and sharing.
Well, love it. Absolutely a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for your insights, sharing your personal stories in such an inspiring way. Dom Price, take care.
Thank you, Janie.